All right, let's jump right into this explainer. The year is 1944, and we really need to set a desperate stage here. World War II has entered its absolute bloodiest phase. Germany's armies, they're in full retreat on the Eastern Front. The Allies have just landed in Normandy. Basically, the walls are closing in fast. And deep inside the German military itself, a group of senior officers comes to this chilling conclusion. They realize there is literally only one way left to save their country from total annihilation. They have to kill Adolf Hitler. So today, we're unpacking the story of Operation Valkyrie. It's a plot that came agonizingly close to success, failed by the absolute narrowest of margins, and, well, unleashed a massive wave of bloodshed. So I want you to think about this. What if a few inches changed the entire outcome of the Second World War? Now, I know that sounds like some massive, dramatic exaggeration, right? But as we go through this, you're going to see exactly how literal that statement actually is. We're looking at a moment in history where the fate of millions of people hinged on tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in space and time. The sheer difficulty of actually killing Hitler is just staggering. Between 1938 and 1944, there were more than 40 known plots to assassinate him. Over 40. And every single one of them either failed outright or was just called off at the absolute last second. So by July 1944, these senior German officers, they knew they were totally out of time. And the guy leading the charge? Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. Now, Stauffenberg was a highly decorated officer who had already sacrificed a ton for his country. I mean, he lost an eye, his right hand, and 2 fingers on his left hand in combat. But because he was now serving as chief of staff of the Reserve Army, he was in the absolute perfect position to strike. And here is where we get to the really dark irony of their whole plan. They built this plot around something called Operation Valkyrie. But they didn't invent this plan from scratch. No, Valkyrie was actually an official emergency protocol originally created by Hitler's own government to put down an internal uprising. So the conspirators decided, hey, let's hijack this exact plan and turn it directly against the regime itself. They were literally going to use the dictator's own security protocol to overthrow him. It's kind of brilliant, honestly. Okay. Let's walk through the execution of this thing, because the margin for error here is razor thin. As part of his normal duties, Stauffenberger regularly attended Hitler's military briefings. So, step 1, smuggle a bomb into the briefing room inside a regular briefcase. Step 2, place that briefcase as close to Hitler as humanly possible, and then just quietly slip out of the room. Step 3, immediately hop on a plane back to Berlin. And finally, step 4, the moment the news of Hitler's death actually breaks, the rest of the guys in Berlin seize control of the government. It's simple in concept, sure, but it leaves absolutely zero room for anything to go wrong. So we arrive at the morning of July 20th, 1944. Stauffenberg travels to Hitler's field headquarters in East Prussia. This place is a heavily guarded complex, famously nicknamed the Wolf's Lair. And you could just imagine the tension. It's got to be palpable. Just before the meeting is supposed to start, Stauffenberg ducks away to finally arm the explosives inside his briefcase. But suddenly, out of nowhere, he gets interrupted. Someone tells him to hurry up, and he's rushed into the briefing before he can actually finish the job. And that interruption is absolutely crucial. Because he was rushed, Stauffenberg only managed to prime one of the 2 explosive blocks he brought with him. Think about that. He is walking into a room packed with the most powerful men in the German military, and he's only carrying half the explosive power he originally planned to use. Talk about ratcheting the suspense up to the maximum. So, Stauffenberg walks into the briefing room. He takes his usual spot at the big conference table, right near Hitler. He casually slides the briefcase under the table, nudging it as close to his target as he can possibly manage without looking suspicious. A few tense moments go by. Then, Stauffenberg mumbles a quick excuse about needing to make a phone call, and he just slips right out of the room, leaving that deadly briefcase sitting right there. All right, now we hit the climax of the whole story. And crazily enough, it all comes down to a heavy oak table leg. Literally moments after Stauffenberg leaves, another officer who has absolutely no clue what is inside that bag leans over and just casually nudges the briefcase out of his way. He pushes it behind one of the table's thick, heavy wooden support legs. It is such a small, completely unassuming, almost meaningless gesture. But guys, that tiny little movement is about to change the entire course of human history. At exactly 12:42 p.m., boom, the bomb detonates. This massive explosion just rips through the room. The interior is completely devastated. 4 men are killed instantly, and several others are severely wounded. Now, from a distance outside, Stauffenberg sees the smoke billowing out and the sheer destruction. Seeing the scale of that blast, he is absolutely dead certain that Hitler is gone. So he doesn't wait around. He rushes straight to the airfield, gets in his plane, and takes off for Berlin to take command of the uprising. But the contrast between what Stauffenberg believed up in that plane and the shocking reality on the ground, it just couldn't have been sharper. Stauffenberg's view is simple. Hitler is dead, let's launch the uprising. But the reality? Hitler actually survived. Remember that heavy wooden table like I mentioned? Well, because the briefcase had been nudged behind it, that thick oak actually absorbed a massive chunk of the explosion's force. Hitler was definitely bruised up, his clothes were literally shredded, his eardrums blew out, and he injured his arm. But he was very much alive. Meanwhile, back in Berlin, the conspirators are totally convinced their target is dead. So they pull the trigger. They activate Operation Valkyrie and order their troops to seize the government buildings. But man, this entire house of cards collapses so fast. Within hours, rumors start spreading that Hitler actually survived. And then, to remove absolutely any shred of doubt, Hitler gets on the radio and personally addresses the entire nation to definitively prove he's still breathing. And the fallout from that broadcast is basically instantaneous. The exact moment people hear his voice, the whole plot unravels. All those military officers who had been kind of wavering, the ones waiting to see which side was going to win before committing, they swiftly flip right back and declare their loyalty to the regime. That very same night, the tide turns completely. Stauffenberg and a few of his closest co-conspirators are arrested. And, well, within hours, they're executed by firing squad. But honestly, that swift execution was just the beginning of the nightmare. Hitler took this plot as a deeply, deeply personal betrayal, and he wanted absolute vengeance. In the months that followed, the Gestapo launched this massive, terrifying investigation. They ended up arresting nearly 5,000 people. 5,000. Some of them were directly involved, sure, but a lot of them were just vaguely suspected of having ties to the conspirators. The sheer human cost of Hitler's paranoia was staggering. Out of those thousands of arrests, hundreds of people were executed, often in just horribly brutal ways. And this purge went all the way up to the absolute highest levels of the German military. Even Field Marshal Erwin Rommel got swept up in it. Now, historians still debate his exact connection to the plot even today. But regardless, the regime forced him to take his own life just to spare his family from public disgrace and execution. So you kind of have to ask, what is the actual legacy of a failed plot like this? Well, today, Klaus von Stauffenberg and the rest of the conspirators are remembered very differently than how they were treated back in 1944. In modern Germany, they're really viewed as symbols of resistance. These were men who risked absolutely everything to stand up against a completely brutal regime. They're commemorated for trying to overthrow a tyrannical government from the inside, even though they knew full well the odds of actually pulling it off were incredibly slim. Which brings us right back to that final lingering thought we started with. What if that briefcase had never been moved? Operation Valkyrie stands as one of history's ultimate what-ifs. We're talking about a moment where a few inches and a couple of seconds might have completely changed the outcome of World War II. Had that bag not been nudged behind a heavy table leg, the final chapter of the war could have looked vastly different. It just goes to show how incredibly fragile the margins of history truly are. Anyway, if you enjoyed this explainer and found this breakdown interesting, definitely subscribe to the channel and let us know down in the comments, what piece of history should we dive into next? See you on the next one.